For millennia, the galactic community had marked the Great Alignment on their star charts with a mixture of dread and meticulous preparation. Every 1,000 Earth Standard years, the cosmic dance of 3 specific stellar nurseries, a rogue black hole, and the unique gravitational field of the Milky Way's central supermassive black hole created a fleeting yet potent planar instability. For most sentient species, this meant one thing: the veils between dimensions thinned, allowing entities from the underrealms, literal, fire-and-brimstone demons of pure malevolence to breach into their reality. Ancient texts from the Cathar spoke of the Shadow Eaters. The Lumina pulsed with warnings of the Void Screamers, and the enigmatic Valar simply retreated into deeper stasis. Worlds went silent during these periods, their populations evacuating or shielding themselves behind hyperdimensional force fields. It was a time of galactic quietude, a respectful, fearful acknowledgement of a force beyond their comprehension. On Earth, however, things were different. As the Great Alignment of 2242 approached, instead of frantic evacuations or somber preparations, humanity geared up for the most anticipated holiday of the year: Halloween. The Federation government, while officially maintaining a stance of scientific skepticism regarding interdimensional entities, had long ago integrated the millennia-old traditions of October 31st into its planetary defense grid. What began as an ancient Celtic festival, morphing through centuries of cultural shifts into a celebration of ghouls and goblins, had, unbeknownst to the wider galaxy, become humanity's primary, most effective, and utterly baffling defense mechanism. The cities buzzed with an almost frantic energy. Holographic pumpkin lanterns floated in the air, casting eerie orange glows over bustling street markets, selling bioluminescent slime and genuine spectral essence, mostly flavored sugar water. Children, dressed as everything from classic vampires to obscure alien species depicted in obscure sci-fi shows, ran through parks, their laughter echoing. Adults meticulously crafted elaborate costumes, transforming their homes into haunted mansions complete with animatronic monsters and fog machines. The sheer, overwhelming, joyful chaos was palpable. A vibrant, multi-sensory symphony of perceived fear and deliberate play. Deep within the Terran Federation's classified archives, a handful of xenological experts, including the exasperated Dr. Eris Thorne, monitored the cosmic readings. The planar thinning was reaching its peak. Energy signatures from the underrealms, signatures that would send most species into existential dread, were bleeding through the dimensional fabric. "They're here," Eris muttered, watching the spikes on his console, "and they're probably already incredibly confused." He looked out his office window at the kaleidoscope of costumes and light below. It was madness. Glorious, beautiful, terrifying madness. And he suspected it was about to save them all. The planar breach occurred precisely as predicted, a silent tear in the fabric of reality over several key points on Earth. In the frigid wastes of Siberia, a jagged crack opened above an ancient dolmen. Over the bustling neon heart of Neo-Tokyo, a shimmering portal briefly warped the skyline. And most importantly, a swirling vortex of shadow and crimson light manifested directly above the historic Salem Commons in Massachusetts, right in the middle of the town's annual Halloween festival. This was where the first true demons emerged. A towering creature of obsidian chitin and crackling green energy, its eyes like twin pools of malice, stepped through the Salem portal. Its aura radiated pure, unadulterated terror, designed to freeze mortal hearts and wither minds. It prepared its ancient, soul-crushing shriek, its purpose clear: to sow despair, to drain hope, to claim souls. It was a Phobos-Lord, a harbinger of fear, and it had entered a world ripe for its harvest. But instead of the expected screams of agony and widespread panic, the Phobos-Lord was met with a burst of laughter. A group of teenagers dressed as various horror movie tropes, a zombie, a chainsaw-wielding maniac, a ghost with glowing eyes, saw the towering demon. "Whoa, awesome costume, dude!" yelled one, dressed as a holographic alien. "The green energy effect is sick." Another tried to high-five its clawed hand. The Phobos-Lord paused, its ancient malevolence sputtering. Its aura of fear, meant to be absolute, was somehow diluted by the sheer, unbridled confidence of human children, assuming it was part of the show. Simultaneously, the air became thick with the smell of cheap candy, pumpkin spice, and synthetic fog. Loud, bass-heavy electronic music throbbed from massive speakers, playing a remix of a classic horror movie theme. Children, seeing the colossal demon, squealed with delight, convinced it was the super boss of a haunted house attraction. They charged forward, holding out candy buckets, demanding treat or treat. The Phobos-Lord, whose entire existence was predicated on being recognized as an ultimate, terrifying force, found itself utterly misunderstood. Dr. Eris Thorne, monitoring the real-time data from Salem from his secure Federation observatory, watched in bewildered awe. The demon's fear aura, instead of inducing panic, was being absorbed, reinterpreted, and almost diluted by the dense, chaotic conceptual field of human play fear. The collective human belief in harmless monsters, in fun scares, was acting like a filter, scrambling the demon's intended effect. The Phobos-Lord, an entity of pure, focused terror, was struggling to operate in an environment where terror was a game, its ancient power strangely muted. Humanity, in its glorious, chaotic Halloween celebration, had inadvertently created a conceptual fog of war, bewildering the very beings it sought to scare. As more demons poured through the planar breaches around the globe, they encountered similar baffling resistance. A Malice-Weaver, a spider-like entity that spun webs of pure hatred and despair, manifested in a quiet suburban street, its intent to corrupt and divide. It began to subtly influence the minds of passers-by, whispering dark thoughts, igniting dormant resentments. But the street was filled with adults engaged in a fiercely competitive, haunted yard contest. Their passionate, exaggerated displays of simulated fear, their over-the-top curses and spells hurled at animatronic ghosts, created a conceptual countercurrent. The Malice-Weavers' whispers of genuine hatred were muffled, almost comically misinterpreted, as mere background noise in the cacophony of playful animosity. One family's intense rivalry over who had the best glowing skeletal display actually seemed to repel the demon's influence, their petty human squabbles proving too dense and self-contained for the creature to penetrate effectively. Another demon, a soul drinker, an ethereal, vampiric entity that fed on pure life force, materialized in the middle of a massive, multi-level dance club that had been entirely redecorated as a Gothic haunted mansion. The soul drinker expected silence, fear, and individuals isolated in their terror. Instead, it was surrounded by hundreds of bodies, pressed together, throbbing to loud music, laughing, flirting, and occasionally engaging in highly exaggerated drunken scares at each other. The sheer, overwhelming collective human energy was a sensory assault. The soul drinker found itself unable to focus on individual souls. Its siphoning power, designed for isolated fear, was dispersed and overwhelmed by the joyful, chaotic, interconnected vitality of humanity. It recoiled, its ethereal form flickering as if trying to grasp a single, coherent source of life amidst the joyous maelstrom. Dr. Eris Thorne, now coordinating a global effort to analyze the demonic incursions, observed a consistent pattern. The demons, each a highly specialized predator of specific negative human emotions, were finding their prey elusive. Their ancient powers, finely tuned over millennia to exploit fear, despair, or hatred, were simply not designed for a species that actively mimicked these emotions for fun. The costumes they encountered weren't just disguises, they were conceptual buffers. The pranks weren't just jokes, they were disruptions. The parties weren't just gatherings, they were conceptual shields of collective revelry. The demons were not being defeated by force, but by a profound, cultural misinterpretation. Their very essence, their purpose, was being twisted and muted by humanity's joyous, confident, almost arrogant refusal to take them seriously. A Phobos-Lord, used to commanding absolute dread, was left baffled when a child dressed as a tiny space alien offered it a lollipop. A Malice-Weaver, seeking to unravel minds with hatred, found itself lost in the trivial competitive animosity of a yard decorating contest. Humanity's Halloween, the Festival of Fiends, was not just a celebration. It was a cosmic performance art defense, where every laugh, every scare, every piece of candy was a conceptual counterstrike against the invading darkness. As Halloween night wore on, the planetary defense systems, which had initially prepared for military-grade incursions, found themselves merely monitoring the chaos. The traditional response protocols, containment fields, psychic dampeners, energy weapons remained on standby, utterly unnecessary. Humanity's paradoxical shield of celebration was working with astonishing, terrifying effectiveness. The demons, creatures of pure, focused intent, found themselves increasingly disoriented. They were used to clear prey, to predictable emotional responses. But humans, especially on Halloween, were a bewildering paradox. A child genuinely terrified by a jump scare in a haunted house would immediately burst into delighted laughter. An adult, expressing mock anger at a costume judging, would then share a sincere compliment. The line between genuine emotion and playful imitation was so blurred, so constantly shifting, that the demons, whose very existence relied on parsing and exploiting clear emotional states, found their powers nullified. The psychic sours, entities that implanted seeds of profound despair and existential dread into minds, found their whispers muffled by the sheer, unquantifiable optimism of humans who chose to find joy in spooky decorations and sweet treats. Their intended targets, isolated individuals ripe for existential unraveling, were instead surrounded by friends, family, and strangers sharing the communal experience of playful fear. A sour, attempting to inject cosmic futility into a young woman's mind, was instead inundated with her vivid, joyful thoughts about her Halloween costume, her friends, and the prospect of carving a perfect pumpkin. The cosmic dread bounced off the mundane. Human happiness. Dr. Eris Thorne, in a moment of profound revelation, likened it to trying to understand a complex alien language, only to find that the language was composed entirely of puns, inside jokes, and constantly evolving slang. The demons were trying to parse the grammar of fear, only to find humanity speaking in riddles, finding humor in the absurd, and treating the cosmic as merely another theatrical prop. This wasn't just a cultural defense. It was an ontological defense. Humanity was fundamentally incompatible with the demons' predatory psychology. As the first streaks of dawn began to paint the sky, signaling the end of Halloween, the planar breaches began to seal themselves. The demons, their mission failed, their purpose bewildered, slowly retreated. Some vanished in flickers of frustrated energy. Others simply slumped, temporarily inert, their forms unable to sustain themselves in a conceptual environment so utterly alien to their nature. Humanity, blissfully unaware of the true cosmic war they had just won, began to clean up the confetti, the candy wrappers, and the discarded costume pieces, already planning for next year's festivities. They had faced true, unholy malevolence, and they had conquered it not with lasers or force fields, but with laughter, costumes, and the glorious, irreducible chaos of a festival of fiends. The galaxy's ancient fear had met humanity's untamed joy, and joy, it turned out, was the more terrifying weapon. As the planar breaches sealed and the last of the bewildered demons flickered back into the underrealms, Earth awoke to a strangely ordinary November 1st. The streets, though littered with candy wrappers, discarded costume bits, and the lingering scent of pumpkin spice, hummed with the mundane rhythm of post-holiday cleanup. Humanity, by and large, remained blissfully unaware of the cosmic war they had just inadvertently won. For them, it had been another incredibly successful Halloween. The demons had been particularly good this year, the haunted houses exceptionally immersive, and the jump scares truly top-notch. Dr. Eris Thorne's Secure Federation Observatory, however, was anything but ordinary. His consoles, still alight with the residual energy signatures of the retreating demonic entities, painted a clear picture of their disoriented withdrawal. The data was unequivocal. The demons had been profoundly, spectacularly baffled. Their powerful, fear-inducing auras had been diluted. Their mind-warping whispers had been misinterpreted as playful banter. Their very attempts to sow chaos had been subsumed by the greater, more vibrant chaos of human celebration. Federation High Command, initially skeptical, now pored over Eris's compiled reports with a mixture of disbelief and awe. The holographic recordings of the Phobos-Lord being offered a lollipop, the Malice-Weaver recoiling from a competitive yard display, the Soul Drinker overwhelmed by a disco dance floor. These were not just scientific anomalies. They were cultural battlefields where humanity's most bizarre traditions had triumphed over genuine existential threats. The official report classified Project Trick or Treat declared Halloween to be a conceptual, counter-incursion protocol, a defense system so unconventional it was almost incomprehensible. News of Earth's response to the Great Alignment slowly filtered through the galactic community, carried by long-range sensors picking up the lingering energy signatures and the bewildered retreats of the underrealm entities. The elder races reacted with utter stupefaction. The Cathar, a species of rigid logic and strategic precision, found humanity's methods utterly nonsensical. They fought the Shadow Eaters with theatrical masks and processed sugar. Ambassador Zelor, a Lumina diplomat, pulsed with a complex light pattern that conveyed both profound confusion and a flicker of something akin to incredulous admiration. No species had ever faced the Great Alignment with such an utterly unorthodox, joyful, and terrifyingly effective strategy. Eris Thorn, now burdened with the unique knowledge of humanity's accidental genius, felt a strange mix of pride and apprehension. They had stumbled upon a perfect defense, one rooted so deeply in their irrational culture that no alien entity, demonic or otherwise, could ever truly comprehend it. But he also knew that the demons, given time, might adapt. They might learn to pierce the veil of play to recognize the true fear beneath the masks. Humanity had won this round not by design, but by being spectacularly, gloriously, and terrifyingly themselves. The aftermath of Joy was a galactic misunderstanding that had just saved a civilization. The Terran Federation, still reeling from the implications of Project Trick or Treat, faced an unprecedented challenge, explaining to the wider galactic community why Earth had apparently thrown a massive party in the face of a known demonic invasion. The Cathar demanded logical explanations. The Lumina sought conceptual clarity. The Velar, roused from their deeper stasis by the sheer anomaly of Earth's survival, merely transmitted a single, complex data packet conveying profound, unsettling curiosity. Dr. Eris Thorn, along with Commander Ava Rostova, his former colleague from the New Horizon Project, now overseeing xenological defense, were dispatched to the Galactic Council to present their findings. Their holographic presentation, juxtaposing raw demonic energy signatures with footage of costumed children demanding candy, was met with stunned silence. Eris painstakingly explained the concept of play fear, the conceptual fog of war, and the ontological incompatibility of human chaotic joy against focused demonic malevolence. He detailed how humanity's embrace of harmless fright, their communal celebration of the macabre, acted as a defense that scrambled the demons' very perception, making them unable to effectively harvest fear, despair, or hatred. Ambassador Zelor, his Lumina form pulsing with a spectrum of baffled colors, finally broke the silence. "You mean to tell us, Terrans, that your primary defense against literal beings of pure evil is to dress up as them and ask for sweets?" Rostova, ever pragmatic, simply nodded. "It appears so, Ambassador. We call it Halloween!" The Cathar ambassador's multiple ocular stalks seemed to twitch in visible confusion. "This is inefficient, illogical, chaotic." Eris then presented the chilling data. During the Great Alignment, human planets that hadn't fully embraced Halloween traditions, fringe colonies, isolated research outposts, had indeed suffered genuine measurable losses to demonic incursions. Those that fully committed to the Festival of Fiends had experienced zero casualties. The evidence was irrefutable, yet utterly baffling. Humanity's greatest defense was not a technology, but a cultural phenomenon. The Galactic Council, in a landmark decision, formally recognized Halloween as an anomaly-class planetary defense protocol. They didn't understand it, couldn't replicate it, and found it profoundly disturbing. But they couldn't deny its effectiveness. The elder races, who had long practiced logical, ordered self-preservation, now looked at humanity with a new, unsettling blend of respect and fear. They had stumbled upon a species whose internal, irrational world was a more potent weapon than any starship. Humanity had proven that in the vast, dangerous galaxy, sometimes the most illogical response was the most powerful, turning their unique cultural madness into an impregnable galactic shield. Months after the Great Alignment, the galaxy settled back into its uneasy peace, but the lessons of Earth's Halloween lingered. While humanity celebrated their unique defense, Dr. Eris Thorne and Dr. Lena Petrova, who had joined Project Trick or Treat as a xenopsychologist, harbored a growing unease. The demons, creatures of immense age and cunning, would not remain baffled forever. There were subtle whispers, faint conceptual bleed-throughs from the underrealms, indicating a shift. The demons were learning. They were adapting. Petrova's research into the residual energy signatures showed fragmented, distorted psychic signals that suggested demonic attempts at conceptual analysis. The entities, initially overwhelmed by the sheer, unquantifiable chaos of Halloween, were now trying to parse its underlying logic. They were trying to understand the paradox of play fear, to distinguish genuine terror from joyous imitation. This meant the next incursion, though centuries away by Earth's calendar, might not be so easily thwarted by costumed children and candy. The demons, in their ancient alien way, were beginning to understand the difference between a theatrical prop and a true threat. They were trying to learn to ignore the static of playful scares and home decor and focus on the genuine threads of human emotion. They sought to identify the vulnerabilities within humanity's vibrant chaos, the moments when play might tip into true terror, when joy might sour into despair. Eris and Petrova knew that humanity could not simply rely on instinct. They needed to consciously evolve their defense to make Halloween even more chaotic, even more unpredictable. They theorized that the demon's logical framework, however alien, still required a degree of predictability. Humanity's defense, therefore, needed to become a constantly unfolding, evolving conceptual labyrinth, one that never offered the same solution twice. They proposed a radical expansion of Project Trick or Treat, a global initiative to encourage even greater creativity, more varied traditions, more intense yet harmless forms of celebratory chaos. They wanted to foster new Halloween memes, new forms of costuming, new types of scares that would constantly shift the conceptual landscape, making it impossible for the demons to develop a stable counter-strategy. The whispers of adaptation from the underrealms were clear. The demons were trying to crack humanity's code. But Eris and Petrova planned to make sure that code was constantly rewriting itself, turning every human's unique imagination into a constantly evolving, living defense. The Terran Federation embraced Project Trick or Treat's expansion with gusto, ushering in what became known as the cultural arms race. Official government grants were suddenly available for innovative Halloween decor, conceptual scare, engineering, and psycho-emotional costuming. Artists, engineers, game designers, and even philosophers were recruited to push the boundaries of Halloween, transforming it from a mere holiday into a planet-wide, self-evolving conceptual defense system. This wasn't about building bigger weapons. It was about building more complex narratives, more elaborate forms of shared play fear, more layers of joyous, unpredictable chaos. Competitions were held for the most absurdly contradictory costume, e.g., a sad clown astronaut vampire doing taxes. Neighborhoods vied to create the most intricately confusing haunted houses, designed not just to scare, but to overwhelm the senses with a delightful barrage of shifting realities. Holographic technology, once reserved for military applications, was now democratized for intricate light displays that mimicked ghostly apparitions or projected fantastical creatures onto city skylines. The goal was to make Halloween a true conceptual labyrinth, one where the demons, in their attempts to adapt, would constantly find their learning models obsolete. If they learned to filter out traditional ghost energy signatures, humanity would respond with cyber ghosts and quantum poltergeists. If they learned to distinguish between real fear and mock terror, humanity would blur the lines even further, creating experiences so intense, yet so clearly artificial, that the distinction became meaningless. Dr. Aris Thorne and Dr. Lena Petrova became the public faces of this cultural revolution, explaining to skeptical galactic observers that humanity wasn't being frivolous. They were being strategically, brilliantly chaotic. Petrova's xenopsychological insights were crucial, guiding the development of conceptual lures and emotional dampeners within the festive chaos, ensuring that genuine fear was always sublimated into play, preventing any real foothold for the demons. The elder races watched this cultural arms race with a mixture of growing bewilderment and grudging respect. The Cathar still found it illogical, but could not deny the increasing conceptual density around Earth. The Lumina, their light patterns now conveying a grudging understanding, saw the brilliance in humanity's ever-shifting defense. Humanity, in its preparation for the next great alignment, was not just building a shield. It was weaving an ever-unfolding tapestry of joy, fear, and glorious absurdity, creating a defense so deeply rooted in their untamed culture that no demonic adaptation, no matter how cunning, could ever hope to break it. They were weaponizing their own vibrant, unpredictable essence, turning their greatest holiday into an impregnable cosmic fortress. Centuries passed, marked by the escalating cultural arms race on Earth. Halloween evolved into a truly global, year-round phenomenon, its conceptual chaos expanding and intertwining with every aspect of human life. The next great alignment of 2542, however, arrived with a new, chilling precision. The planar breaches that opened were fewer in number but far more focused. This time, the demons arrived with an eerie, terrifying, purposeful calm. They had adapted. The first entity to emerge, a psychic tracker, manifested not amidst a bustling city festival, but in a seemingly quiet residential zone. Its form was less overtly monstrous than its predecessors, a subtle shimmer in the air, its purpose refined. It had learned to filter the noise of general revelry, seeking out threads of genuine human anxiety, fear, or despair, however small. Its energy signatures showed a precise targeting algorithm, honed over centuries of underrealm analysis, designed to pierce the conceptual fog. The tracker found a young girl, Ilara, hiding alone in her bedroom. Her parents were at a neighborhood party, and she was genuinely afraid of the monsters lurking in the shadows outside her window, despite the festive lights. This was the pure, untainted fear the demons craved, the kind that could anchor their power. The tracker began to amplify her fear, to turn playful apprehension into genuine terror, to unravel her sense of safety. It had found a vulnerability in humanity's defense, the innocent, unshielded fear of a child. But the tracker made a critical error. Ilara, though terrified, was also a product of the cultural arms race. Her fear was intense, but it was also imaginative. She wasn't just afraid of a vague monster. She was afraid of a shadow beast with glowing red eyes that eats nightmares and smells like burnt toast. Her mind, constantly exposed to elaborate Halloween narratives, instinctively began to create a detailed, if terrifying, story for her fear. She knew its weaknesses from countless fictional tales, its rules from endless games of pretend. Suddenly, a loud, booming voice from outside bellowed, "Trick or treat!" It was Ilara's father, dressed as an enormous, friendly-looking space pirate, now standing on their lawn, accompanied by a group of neighborhood kids in equally elaborate costumes. Their collective laughter, their playful threats of toilet papering the house, created an immediate, overwhelming wave of joyful, chaotic noise that slammed into the psychic tracker. The demon, expecting pure, isolated fear, was met with the surge of a child's imagination overlaid with a parent's boisterous love and the collective energy of a neighborhood party. The conceptual purity it sought was instantly diluted, scrambled, and redefined. The tracker recoiled, its refined algorithm struggling to categorize a fear that was simultaneously real, imaginative, and submerged in playful affection. Humanity's adaptation of Halloween had met demonic adaptation, and the untamed roar of joy proved once again to be the more powerful force. The second incursion proved to be a far more dangerous, yet ultimately even more bewildering, experience for the invading demons. They had learned to filter the noise, but they hadn't learned to cope with humanity's conceptual overload. Each demon's refined attempt to target genuine fear or despair was met with a counterwave of so much layered, contradictory, and intentionally absurd meaning that their own sophisticated filters broke down. A despair harvester, an entity that fed on profound sadness and existential angst, manifested in a quiet park searching for loneliness. It found an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench, lost in melancholic thoughts about her late husband. The harvester began its insidious work, amplifying her grief. But then, a group of teenagers, dressed as a rock band of zombie clowns, burst into the park, setting up an impromptu concert. Their music was loud, enthusiastic, and wonderfully terrible. The elderly woman, startled, slowly found herself smiling, then tapping her foot. The raw, uninhibited joy, the sheer presentness of the moment, the utterly absurd spectacle of zombie clowns playing rock music, completely overwhelmed the despair harvester's delicate conceptual siphons. Its target's grief was still there, but it was now overlaid with amusement, with nostalgic irritation, with the simple human pleasure of an unexpected show. The demon, unable to isolate the pure sadness, retreated in confusion, its systems overloaded by the sheer multiplicity of human emotion. Another entity, a discord stirrer, designed to amplify arguments and societal division, manifested near a heated political debate at a community hall. It sought to ignite hatred and create irreparable rifts. But the debate was part of a larger Halloween-themed civic costume party where participants were dressed as satirical representations of political figures or abstract concepts. The arguments, while passionate, were framed by humor, by the shared understanding that it was also a performance. A local politician, dressed as a giant grinning tax form, passionately argued against a person dressed as a frowning, oversized regulation book. The discord stirrer, expecting pure venomous division, found itself confronted with complex, nuanced arguments delivered through the medium of absurd theater, infused with both genuine conviction and playful mockery. Its probes, designed to latch onto pure hatred, were baffled by the contradictory nature of human engagement, where serious discourse could coexist with festive costumes and playful antagonism. The demon systems, unable to parse the layers of irony and intent, short-circuited. Dr. Eris Thorne and Dr. Lena Petrova monitored the planet-wide data with a sense of grim satisfaction. The demons were attempting surgical strikes, but humanity had become a conceptual minefield. Every costume, every joke, every shared moment of joy or mock fear was a self-evolving conceptual trap. The demons' refined filters, instead of allowing them to focus, were simply causing them to drown in the boundless, contradictory sea of human meaning. They were not just being repelled, they were being conceptually overwhelmed, their ancient, specialized predatory instincts utterly useless against a species that had weaponized its own vibrant, untamed absurdity. As the final hours of the Great Alignment ticked down, a new, more terrifying kind of demon manifested. Not a Phobos-Lord or a despair harvester, but a null gazer, an entity so ancient and powerful that it didn't feed on emotions. It simply unmade them. Its gaze, once fixed, could drain the very meaning from a memory, from a purpose, from a life, leaving behind only existential void. This was the ultimate countermeasure to humanity's conceptual chaos, pure, unadulterated nullification. A null gazer materialized silently above a massive outdoor Halloween rave, a cacophony of light, sound, and 1,000 wildly imaginative costumes. Its target, the very heart of the collective joy, the shared, vibrant energy of the celebration. Its intention was not to cause fear, but to simply make the joy pointless, to drain the meaning from the music, the dancing, the costumes, the connections, until only hollow movements remained. As its unmaking gaze swept over the crowd, Elias felt a cold, sharp dread, unlike anything he had experienced before. His conceptual sensors flickered erratically, registering a sudden, profound drain of coherence. People began to slow, their movements becoming listless. The vibrant colors of their costumes seemed to dull. The music felt strangely flat, its rhythm losing purpose. The null gazer was working. It was effectively cutting through the layers of conceptual chaos, aiming for the core of human meaning itself. But then, something extraordinary happened. A young woman, dressed as a fantastically elaborate cosmic squid alien, stumbled mid-dance. Instead of falling into despair, she laughed, a loud, infectious burst of pure, unadulterated human mirth. She then deliberately, playfully collapsed to the ground, writhing in exaggerated theatrical agony, proclaiming loudly, "Oh, the existential horror! My tentacle has lost all meaning!" Her friends immediately joined in, playfully mimicking her, creating a tableau of performative, self-aware absurdity. This wasn't just chaos. It was meta-chaos. Humans, innately storytellers, had instinctively turned the very act of losing meaning into a new, humorous, and deeply meaningful performance. They were laughing at the null gazer's power, turning its existential threat into a comedic prop in their ongoing narrative. The null gazer's unmaking gaze, designed to target the sanctity of meaning, found itself confronted with a species that could find meaning even in its own unmaking. It was like trying to drain a pond with a bucket, only for the pond to start actively refilling itself with water from its own splashes. The entity, designed to nullify, found itself bewildered by a target that celebrated its own conceptual resilience, a species that gazed into the void and decided to dance with the emptiness. Its power, predicated on the solemnity of meaning, simply short-circuited in the face of such playful, defiant absurdity. The Great Alignment ended, and the planar breaches sealed for another millennium. The null gazer, utterly bewildered by humanity's capacity to find meaning even in conceptual unraveling, retreated, its formidable power nullified not by force, but by a species that laughed at its own existential dread. The demons, each a specialized predator of negative human emotion, had been comprehensively defeated, not by weapons, but by culture. They had met humanity's boundless, chaotic, and fiercely joyful spirit, and they had found it utterly incomprehensible, and therefore utterly unconquerable. Humanity, for the most part, remained unaware of the true, cosmic stakes of their Halloween. They cleaned up the last of the confetti, tucked away their costumes, and returned to their routines, already planning for next year's Festival of Fiends. But the scientific and xenological community, led by the now world-renowned Dr. Eris Thorne and Dr. Lena Petrova, carried the profound knowledge of their unique victory. They had definitively proven that humanity's greatest defense was not its technology, but its untamed, unpredictable heart. The Galactic Council, in a move that baffled many, formally adopted a Terran-inspired cultural resilience initiative. While no other species could truly replicate humanity's specific brand of festive chaos, they began to explore their own unique cultural expressions, their art, their music, their communal rituals, as potential conceptual shields against unforeseen threats. Humanity had, inadvertently, taught the galaxy that sometimes the most logical response to cosmic horror was not fear or retreat, but bold, confident, and joyful defiance. Earth, the birthplace of the Festival of Fiends, became a beacon of conceptual resilience in the galaxy. Its vibrant, ever-evolving Halloween traditions were studied, admired, and sometimes feared. Humanity had shown that their love for stories, their capacity for play, their ability to find humor in darkness, and their stubborn insistence on joy, even in the face of genuine terror, was an impenetrable, ever-shifting shield. Eris Thorne, now an old man, sat on his porch, watching children in fantastical costumes run past, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. The planar breaches would reopen again 1,000 years hence, but he knew humanity would be ready. They would greet the demons not with fear, but with an even more elaborate, more chaotic, more joyously absurd Festival of Fiends. For humanity had discovered that their greatest weapon against the darkest entities of the cosmos was simply their untamed, ever-festive spirit, an unending, vibrant celebration of existence itself, a joyous, terrifying, and ultimately unconquerable roar against the void.